She tried to avoid the Alpha King all evening. He finally cornered her with one question. The castle's halls were alive with music and laughter, but Lady Alara felt none of it. She moved through the golden light and the sparkling mirrors as though she were a shadow herself, unnoticed and cautious. The grand ballroom of King Kale's palace was overflowing with nobles, each one wearing delicate masks and elegant gowns, hiding their faces but not their ambitions. The air smelled of roses, candle wax, and something heavier, something that whispered danger. Elora had been warned about the Alpha King long before she arrived. Tales of his dominance, of his power, and of the curse that surrounded him had followed her since she was a girl. She knew that to be noticed by him was dangerous, and yet, despite her careful steps, her heart betrayed her. Somewhere in the crowd she could feel his gaze even before she saw him. It was like a shadow brushing against her, and she instinctively pulled herself straighter, lifting her chin in defiance, though fear fluttered in her chest. She paused near the wall, pretending to examine the intricate golden patterns carved into the castle stone. She hoped he would pass by and that she could disappear into the crowd again, but in the same moment the whispers of the court grew louder, and she could feel the tension in the room shift. Conversations dipped and eyes turned. There was a presence in the room that could not be ignored. King Kale entered as if the ballroom had been waiting for him to breathe life into it. His presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. The music seemed to soften when he walked, and the candles flickered as though bowing to him. He was tall, perfectly straight, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that burned like storm clouds. His mask was black, simple yet elegant, hiding nothing of the power he carried in every movement, every glance. Elara's heart raced. She had sworn to avoid him. All evening she had danced politely with lesser nobles, laughed at jokes that were not funny, and tried to melt into the background. But now Kale moved with a predator's grace through the crowd, and she knew he was aware of her, even if he had not yet spoken. Her thoughts raced. Why does he want me? What would he do if he found out who I really am? Her secret, the hidden power that lived within her, could destroy her if revealed. The court did not forgive, and Kale was not known for mercy. And yet there was something in his gaze that made her stomach tighten, a curiosity that seemed almost human. It was dangerous, intoxicating. Elara turned away and moved toward the balcony doors, hoping the fresh air would calm her nerves. The moonlight spilled over the polished marble, painting the terrace in silver. The garden beyond stretched into darkness, the statues of forgotten kings, staring silently with stone eyes. She took a deep breath and tried to focus on the cool night air, on the soft rustle of the trees, on anything but him. Lady Alara. The voice was smooth and low, carrying the weight of authority and the thrill of danger, all at once. She did not need to turn to know he was there. I was just... Her words faltered. She did not lie. She was just trying to escape. "You're avoiding me all evening," Kale said, his tone calm but edged with something that made her pulse jump. "And yet here you are, standing alone." Elara's hands trembled slightly. She straightened, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I needed some air." There was no anger, no cruelty, only the weight of his attention, heavy and inevitable. "Air," he repeated softly. "Do you think you can hide from me, Lady Alara?" "In my kingdom there is no hiding. Not from me. Not from yourself." She wanted to run, but her legs refused. Something in his presence rooted her to the marble floor. She had imagined this moment countless times, each one a nightmare and a dream tangled together. And now it was real. Why do you seek me out?" she asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. "You have no reason." Kale's lips curved just slightly in a hint of a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps the reason is not mine to give, but yours to discover." Alara could feel it in the air, in the way the moonlight seemed to cling to him, in the way the wind whispered through the open balcony doors. It was more than curiosity or desire. It was recognition. They were mirrors of power, of secrets, of loneliness. And yet, in that moment, they were also something else. Two souls circling each other in a dangerous dance. "I do not know what you mean," Elara said, stepping back, though her eyes betrayed the longing she could not speak aloud. Kale tilted his head, studying her carefully. "You do," he said softly. "You feel it. The fear, the curiosity, the temptation." Elara's stomach twisted. He could see everything. He could see her heart, her hidden magic, the truth she kept buried even from herself. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet oddly exhilarated. The sound of laughter from the ballroom reached them, faint and distant, but it seemed to exist in another world. Here, on the balcony, it was only them, only the wind and the moonlight, and the tension that hummed between them like a living thing. "Why are you drawn to me?" Kale asked, stepping closer. The movement was slow, deliberate. He did not touch her, but the mere presence of him filled the space between them. "You avoid me, yet you cannot leave me alone." Elara's breath caught. She did not answer. She could not. To speak the truth would be dangerous, for it would reveal the bond she felt growing, the attraction she could not control. And yet to remain silent was equally perilous, for Kale was not a man who tolerated defiance lightly. Instead, she looked away, toward the distant gardens, toward the shadows that hid secrets she did not dare to uncover. I am not drawn to you," she said, her voice small but firm. I am cautious." Kael's dark eyes softened just slightly, as though he understood the lie she told herself. "Caution is wise," he said. "But it is also lonely." Elara's hands tightened around the folds of her gown. He spoke the truth she had buried, the loneliness she had carried through years of careful hiding. She wanted to run, to escape the pull he exerted over her, but her legs were rooted. Her heart was trapped, caught in the web of his gaze. A sudden movement from the ballroom drew her attention. A noble stumbling, a laugh too loud, a whispered secret. Kale's eyes followed hers, sharp and alert. In a flash she realized that he was always watching, always aware, always in control. The Alpha King was not a man of mistakes or distractions. "And yet," Kale continued, voice soft and low, "you still seek to avoid me. Why?" Elara's mind raced. How could she explain that she felt both danger and longing, fear and fascination, caution and attraction, all at once? How could she explain that her heart beat faster when he was near, even as her mind screamed to flee? I do not know," she whispered. Kale smiled faintly, a hint of something unreadable in his expression. "Then perhaps the answer will reveal itself," he said. "Or perhaps, Lady Elara, it will not. Some truths are discovered in shadows, in silence, and in moments like this." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of roses and rain from the distant gardens. Elara shivered. The air between them was alive, charged with anticipation, with unspoken words and promises that had not yet been made. She knew, deep in her bones, that this was only the beginning. Kael extended a hand just slightly, not touching her, but offering a choice. Stay in the shadows, or step into the light. But remember, the shadows always follow, and the light can burn. Elara's gaze met his, and she saw the storm within him, the power and the curse, the loneliness and the longing, and she realized with a shock that she did not want to flee. She wanted to understand, she wanted to face him, even if it meant danger, even if it meant her heart would be at risk. But before she could respond, the doors to the balcony swung open again, and the music from the ballroom drifted through the night air, calling her back. She stepped back, torn between curiosity and fear. Kale's eyes followed her, dark and intense, as if reading her very soul. "Think carefully, Lady Elara," he said, his voice carrying over the wind. "Every choice has its price, and some prices are heavier than gold." Elara swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She nodded, though she did not move forward. She could feel his presence lingering, even as the distance grew. The shadow of Kale, the Alpha King, had touched her life, and she knew nothing would ever be the same. As she turned back toward the ballroom, her pulse racing, she heard him speak again, almost a whisper. "Soon, Lady Alara, we will meet again, and then you will not be able to hide." Her hand trembled on the railing, her heart pounding. The night stretched before her, dark and uncertain, but she could not deny the truth. She wanted to see him again. She wanted to know him. She wanted more. And with that thought, the moonlight seemed to burn a little brighter, casting long shadows across the garden. Shadows that promised danger, longing, and a story that had only just begun. The moon had climbed higher in the night sky, painting the palace gardens in silver light. Mist curled around the marble statues of forgotten kings, their stone eyes staring silently at the world below. Lady Alara stepped cautiously along the cobblestone path, hoping the shadows would hide her from prying eyes. She wanted nothing more than to escape the ballroom, to breathe freely, and to keep the memory of King Kale's gaze from haunting her mind. But the night had other plans. A rustle behind the hedge made her freeze. She turned slowly, heart thundering, and there he stood. Kale, the Alpha King, as commanding and unreadable as ever, his dark eyes fixed on her. Moonlight traced the sharp lines of his face, making him seem almost unreal, as though he had stepped from a painting into the living world. "You cannot escape!" he said, his voice soft, almost gentle, yet carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Not tonight. Not ever." Alara's breath caught. I was not escaping," she whispered, though even she knew the lie was weak. Kale's lips curved faintly. "Yet your footsteps led you here," he said, taking a slow step closer. "To the gardens." Away from the crowd, away from their eyes. Alara's mind raced. Every instinct told her to run, to vanish into the mist, to return to the safety of the ballroom and the safety of anonymity. But something inside her, the same part that had felt his presence all evening, held her in place. I needed space," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "It is quieter here." "Quieter?" Kyle repeated, tilting his head. His gaze softened just a fraction, and Alara felt the pull of it, as if invisible threads tugged her toward him. "I see. You see quiet. Yet you do not realize the danger in being here alone. In my kingdom, the night has ears and eyes you cannot imagine." Her heart skipped a beat. His words were not threats. They were warnings, calm and measured. But they carried an intensity that made her knees feel weak. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to claim her own courage. But words failed her. Kale took another step, closer now, and Alara felt the weight of his presence pressing against her. "You are clever," he said, "and cautious. I admire that. But do you think caution can protect you from me?" I do not wish to be near you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I have no reason to." "Ah," Kale murmured, his eyes narrowing slightly. "No reason? Or perhaps a reason you dare not speak aloud?" He could see through her, see the truths she kept buried, and she realized with a sudden jolt of fear that he was not just speaking to her words. He was speaking to her heart, to her fears, to her longing. She began, but the words stuck in her throat. Kale's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly, and he extended a hand, not to touch, not to command, but to offer a choice. "You do not need to answer now, not with words, but know this. Some truths reveal themselves only when the heart is ready to speak."
Alara's breath hitched. She wanted to refuse.
She wanted to turn and run, to hide behind her carefully constructed walls. But the pull of him, the curiosity, the fear, the fascination, it was stronger than any resolve she had. She took a small step closer, then another, though she did not meet his eyes. The garden seemed alive with tension. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint scent of roses and rain, the mist swirling around them like a veil. Every step she took toward him felt like walking along a knife's edge, thrilling and dangerous. Cale did not speak. He simply watched her, patient, unwavering, as though he had been waiting for this moment all his life. Elara felt a strange mix of fear and longing, as if the very air between them had become charged with something she could not name. "You feel it, don't you?" he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. The pull, the tension, desire to understand what cannot be ignored. Elara's fingers clenched at her sides. I do not know what you mean," she said, though her heart betrayed her. Cale stepped closer, the shadows wrapping around him like a cloak, and she could see the storm in his eyes, the weight of the curse that bound him, the loneliness that had hardened him, the power that had made him feared and untouchable. And yet beneath it, there was something else. A longing, a vulnerability, a depth that few ever glimpsed.
"You do," he said softly, reaching just close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "You feel it. The curiosity.
The fear. The temptation. The need to know what is hidden, and yet you try to deny it. You try to hide." Elara's chest tightened. How could he see so clearly? How could he know the storm inside her? The conflict between fear and fascination, caution and longing. She wanted to flee, to escape, yet her legs refused to move. She wanted to turn away, but her heart would not let her. "You are dangerous," she whispered, barely audible. I should not be here." Cale's gaze softened, and she felt for a moment a vulnerability in him that startled her.
"Dangerous, perhaps," he said.
"But not to you. Not if you are willing to see me as I am, and not as the world has told you to fear me." Elara's mind raced. The stories she had heard of him, of his dominance, of the curse, of the power he wielded without mercy, clashed with the man before her. He was not cruel, not tonight, not here, not in the quiet silver light of the garden. He was complex, dark yet compelling, commanding yet patient. I cannot," she said, shaking her head, though the truth in her heart contradicted her words. "You can," he said softly. And the certainty in his voice made her tremble. "You can, if you choose, if you dare." The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of music from the distant ballroom, reminding her of the world she had tried to leave behind. But here, in the garden, it was only the two of them, suspended in a moment that felt both timeless and fragile. Elara took a step back, trying to regain control, trying to hide the fluttering in her chest. I must return," she said. "The others will notice my absence." Kyle's eyes followed her unrelenting, as if he could see every thought, every hesitation, every truth she tried to hide. "Yes," he said. "Return. But remember this, Lady Elara, avoidance changes nothing. Curiosity does not disappear, and hearts have a way of finding each other, no matter how hard they run." Elara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She nodded, stepping back toward the path that led to the ballroom, but she did not move too quickly. She wanted to feel the lingering warmth of his presence, the memory of the storm in his eyes, the danger and the longing that had filled the air. Cale did not follow her. Not yet. He watched silently, his gaze holding hers until she reached the shadows of the palace walls. Then, finally, he stepped back, merging with the mist and the night as though he had never been there, leaving only the echo of his presence and the tension that clung to her like a second skin. Elara paused at the threshold of the ballroom, taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart. She tried to convince herself it was over, that she could continue the evening without incident. But she knew deep down that this was only the beginning. Cale had touched something within her, a curiosity, a fear, a longing that could not be ignored. As she stepped back into the golden light of the ballroom, her pulse still racing, she heard a whisper in the back of her mind, as if carried on the wind. "Soon, Lady Elara, we will meet again. And then,
You will not be able to hide.
The words sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to shake it off, to focus on the music and the laughter, to remind herself that she was safe among the nobles. But she knew the truth. She was not safe. Not from him. Not from herself. And for the first time that night, she did not want to be safe. The palace was quiet, almost too quiet, as Lady Alara made her way through the corridors. The candles flickered against the cold stone walls, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits. Her mind replayed the events of the garden, every word King Cale had spoken echoing in her heart. She tried to convince herself it had been nothing, an encounter born of curiosity and coincidence, but she knew better. Cale's presence had stirred something within her, a curiosity she could not deny, a fascination she could not ignore. She paused outside a set of grand double doors, their dark wood carved with symbols she did not recognize. Beyond them, she could hear faint footsteps and the soft clink of metal. Her heart tightened. She had been summoned, though no one had said a word aloud. A part of her feared what lay ahead, yet another part hoped. When she entered, she found Cale waiting, not in the ballroom, not in the garden, but here, in a room lined with obsidian mirrors and crimson tapestries. The air smelled faintly of roses and smoke, heavy with the scent of secrets. Shadows pooled in the corners, and the flicker of the candles made his dark eyes gleam like storm clouds. "Lady Alara," Cale said, his voice calm, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "You came." I was called," she said, though she did not know who had called her. The words felt inadequate. She wanted to ask why he was here, what he wanted, but the truth was far more dangerous. He had summoned her, yes, but perhaps not for words, perhaps for truths she had not yet dared to reveal. Cale stepped closer, and the shadows seemed to bend toward him, like the room itself acknowledged his presence. "I do not summon often," he said softly, "but some matters require attention that only you can give." Elara's pulse quickened. "Attention?" she asked, trying to sound steady. "I do not understand." "You will," he said, "soon enough." He motioned toward a chair near the fire, though he did not sit. His posture was commanding, yet he waited patiently, letting her choose whether to sit or remain standing. She hesitated, then moved to the chair, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them in her lap. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing the uncertainty and fear she tried to hide. "I have watched you," Cale began, his voice almost a whisper, yet filled with authority. "I have seen your caution, your cleverness, your restraint. And I have seen the part of you that longs to understand me." Elara's breath caught. He could see everything, her defenses, her fears, her hidden heart. She tried to speak, to protest, but her words faltered. "You are clever," he continued, "and cautious, but even cleverness has limits. Even caution cannot protect you from truths that are already here, and truths cannot be ignored." She looked down at her hands, willing them to stop shaking. "What truths?" she whispered. Cale's dark eyes softened just enough that it made her chest ache. "The truth of my curse," he said. "The truth of what I am, and the truth of what I need." Elara's heart skipped a beat. She had heard whispers of Cale's curse, tales that painted him as cruel, unyielding and untouchable. But the man before her was not cruel. He was commanding, yes, but there was something else beneath the mask of fear he had worn for so long. There was longing. There was loneliness. There was humanity. "You seek something from me," she said carefully. "Something I do not understand." Cael nodded slowly. "I do. And it is something only you can give. Something that cannot be forced, cannot be stolen. A choice from your heart." Elara's stomach twisted. She had feared this. She had feared being drawn into his world, into his power, into his life. But a part of her wanted it. She wanted to help him. She wanted to understand him. She wanted to face the darkness, even if it scared her. What do you need? She asked softly, barely above a whisper. Cale stepped closer, the shadows swirling around him as if alive. I need trust, he said. Complete trust. Not the kind of trust given lightly. Not the kind of trust earned with words alone. Trust given when the heart knows it is taking a risk and still chooses to leap. Elora felt her chest tighten. She had never been asked for such trust. She had never been challenged to open her heart in this way. Her instincts screamed to flee, to hide behind caution and fear. But another part of her, the part that had lingered in the garden, that had felt the pull of him, wanted to step forward, to take that leap. I cannot promise, she said, her voice trembling. I do not know if I can. Cale's eyes softened, though the intensity never left them. I do not ask for promises, he said. I ask for courage. That is all. One moment of courage. One choice that could change everything. Or nothing at all. Alara looked at him, searching for answers in the storm that raged behind his gaze. She saw the burden of his curse, the loneliness that had hardened him, the power that had made him feared and untouchable. And yet, she saw something else, a vulnerability he rarely revealed, a longing for understanding, a hope that she could see him as he truly was. She began, then faltered. She did not know what to say. The words felt inadequate, fragile against the weight of the moment. Eyal stepped even closer, just enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. It is not words I need, he said. It is action, a choice. A willingness to face what is hidden and still reach forward. The room seemed to close around them, the shadows thickening, the firelight dancing across the walls. Elara felt as if she were suspended between fear and longing, between caution and desire, between the life she had known and the unknown path Cale offered. I do not know if I am ready, she whispered, though a small, stubborn part of her wanted to say yes, to trust, to leap, to understand. Cale's gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. Then let that part of you lead, he said softly. The part of you that is not afraid to face what is real, the part of you that longs to see the truth even if it scares you. Elara closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She could feel the pull of him, the weight of his presence, the storm in his eyes and in her own heart. She could feel the tension, the longing, the danger. And she knew she could not turn back. Not now. Not when she had glimpsed the truth of him, the truth of herself, the truth that was waiting to be revealed. She began again, her voice stronger this time. I will try. Cale's lips curved faintly, a shadow of a smile that did not reach his eyes. Good, he said softly. That is all I ask. That is enough, but... For now. A sudden noise from the hallway startled them both. A faint clatter. The echo of footsteps that did not belong to anyone she knew. Cale's eyes darkened, alert and sharp, and he moved instinctively toward the door.
Elora's heart raced.
What? What is it? She asked, though a part of her knew. Danger was never far from Cale, never far from those who were close to him. Nothing yet, he said, his voice calm but tense. But in this palace, shadows do not rest. And some secrets will not remain hidden for long. He returned his gaze to her, and in that moment the intensity between them returned, stronger and more urgent than before. Remember this, Lady Elara? He said, his voice low, almost a whisper. Trust is a dangerous gift, but it is also the only key to breaking the chains for both of us. Elara nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink deep into her heart. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to demand answers, but she knew some truths would reveal themselves in time. And for now, she could only hold on to the fragile thread of trust and the storm of emotion that bound her to him. The candles flickered, the shadows shifted, and Cale finally stepped back, allowing her a moment of space. Rest now, he said, his tone softening. We will meet again. And when we do, the truth will demand action, not words. Elara watched him, her pulse racing as he disappeared into the shadows, leaving her alone with her thoughts, her fears, and the strange, exhilarating pull of him that refused to fade. She sank into a chair, staring at the fire, trying to steady her racing heart. Every word he had spoken echoed in her mind, every glance, every gesture. She felt the stirrings of something she had never known before, a mix of fear, longing, curiosity, and courage. And she realized, with a shock, that she was not afraid of him. She was afraid of what she would feel if she did not step forward. The night stretched on, heavy with secrets and possibility. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the palace, King Kale watched and waited, knowing that the next choice would change everything. Elara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, or the trials that awaited. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She could no longer hide from him, from herself, or from the truth that pulsed between them like a living thing. The storm rolled in over the cliffs, wind tearing through the ruins of the ancient cathedral. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the broken statues of forgotten gods and the shattered remnants of what had once been a sacred place. Rain began to fall, cold and heavy, washing over the stones and turning the mossy paths to slippery trails. Lady Elara stood at the edge of the ruins, her hair plastered to her face, her cloak soaked through. Her heart pounded, not from fear of the storm, but from the weight of what had brought her here. King Kale had summoned her, not for ceremony or conversation, but for a trial. The curse that had haunted him for years, the darkness that had made him feared and untouchable, had reached its peak, and she was the key. Kale stood a few steps ahead of her, his dark coat whipping in the wind. His eyes, stormy and fierce, met hers, and for a moment the wind and rain seemed to pause, as if the world itself held its breath. The curse that bound him had always been a shadow, a chain that twisted through his soul, and tonight, in the ruins of a place long abandoned by gods, it would demand a final reckoning. Elara, he said, voice low but carrying over the storm, you know what must be done. She nodded, though her chest ached with uncertainty. I know, she whispered. But it is not just yours, Kale. It is mine too. He studied her, a mixture of respect, longing, and something almost vulnerable in his gaze. Yes, he said, it is ours. Together. And yet, together does not mean it will be easy. The truth we face is not gentle. The wind howled through the cathedral, the broken pillars casting jagged shadows across the wet stone. Kale moved closer, his presence both commanding and protective. Do you trust me? He asked, his voice steady yet heavy with emotion. Elara took a deep breath, recalling the garden, the shadows, and the room lined with mirrors. She remembered his words, the choice he had asked of her, the courage he had demanded, and she knew that all her fear, all her hesitation, all her longing had led her to this moment. I trust you, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the storm. Kale nodded, his eyes darkening with intensity. Then we begin. He extended his hand and she took it, feeling a spark of warmth and power flow through her. Together, they stepped toward the center of the ruins, where the largest statue of a forgotten god leaned precariously, lightning illuminating its cracked face. The curse that bound Kale had been tied to this place, to the old magic of the gods, and it would not release him easily. As they reached the statue, Kale raised his hands and the air shimmered with energy. Shadows twisted around him, dark and heavy, but they did not feel threatening now. They felt alive, aware, reacting to the presence of someone who dared to challenge them. Elara, Kale said, voice firm but gentle, you must speak the words of the heart, not words of power, not words of command, but truth. Only your truth can bind this curse and release me. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the storm whip against her face, feeling the raw power of Kale and the ruins around them. She could feel the curse, heavy and dark, trying to resist, trying to cling to him, and she knew the only way to break it was to confront not just him, but herself. I, she began, voice trembling. I see you. I see all of you. The strength, the pain, the loneliness, the darkness. And I do not fear it. I do not run from it. I choose you, all of you. And I will stand with you, through light and shadow, through fear and hope. I will not let this curse define you, or us. The wind surged around her, the shadows writhing and twisting as if resisting the power of her words. Lightning struck the cliffs, illuminating the cathedral in brilliant white light. Cale's hands trembled slightly as he responded, the energy between them building, a storm of magic and emotion. Do you mean it? He asked, voice almost breaking. With every part of your heart. Elara met his gaze, unflinching. Yes, she said firmly, with every ounce of courage she possessed. A flash of light erupted from the statue, the storm intensifying as if the gods themselves were watching. Shadows that had clung to Cale for years writhed, screamed in silence, and then began to dissolve, melting into mist and rain. Cale's body shook, but he did not falter. He held onto her hand, anchoring himself, trusting her as she had trusted him. The energy swirled around them, cold and piercing, testing their bond. But with every heartbeat, with every pulse of their courage and trust, the curse weakened, unraveling like a thread from a tapestry. Cale's eyes, dark and stormy, softened, and for the first time Elara saw the man behind the Alpha King. The man who had been lonely, fearful, and burdened by power, now beginning to breathe freely. As the final shadows dissolved, the storm began to calm. Rain fell softly now, washing over the ruins like a blessing. Cale lowered his hands, his chest heaving, and for a moment silence fell over them, broken only by the gentle sound of water dripping from the stone. Elara released her breath, feeling the weight lift, not just from him but from herself. She had faced the fear, the danger, and the unknown, and had chosen to stand with him. The bond they had formed in trust and courage had not just broken the curse, it had transformed it. Cale turned to her, eyes full of something she had not expected, relief, gratitude, and a fragile hope. You saved me, he said softly, almost in disbelief. Elara shook her head, smiling through the rain. We saved each other, she said. You are not alone anymore. He stepped closer, lifting a hand to her face, brushing the wet strands of hair from her eyes. I do not know how to thank you, he whispered, for trusting me, for standing with me, for choosing me. You do not need to thank me, she replied, voice soft but firm. We chose each other. That is enough. The storm had passed, leaving the ruins glistening under the moonlight. The shadows of the cursed past were gone, replaced by a new light, the light of trust, of courage, of hearts intertwined. Cale lowered his hand, but he did not step away. Instead, he reached for hers, holding it gently, securely, as if anchoring both of them to the world and to each other. I have been alone for so long, Cale said, his voice barely above a whisper. I did not know it could be different. Elara's heart ached at the raw honesty in his words.
It can be, she said.
If we choose it. Together. They stood there, hand in hand, looking out over the cliffs where the sea crashed violently against the rocks below. Lightning had faded, leaving only the pale silver of the moon, reflecting off the wet stones. It was a quiet, fragile peace, the kind that comes only after storms both literal and emotional. Cale drew a deep breath, finally releasing the tension that had held him for years. I am free, he said, voice steady yet with a tremor of disbelief. Free, because of you. Elara squeezed his hand. Not just me, she said.
You had to choose it too. You had to let go of the fear, the pain, the darkness.
We both did it. Together. For the first time, Cale smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Together, he repeated the word, tasting new on his lips, as if learning to say it had been a challenge in itself. They did not speak for a while, letting the storm fade completely, letting the night air cool their heated hearts. It was a moment of stillness, of quiet triumph, of the understanding that the trials of the past had not defeated them. They had transformed them. "I will not leave you," Kale said finally, voice soft, almost vulnerable. "Not ever. Whatever comes, we face it together." Elara nodded, a smile forming despite the rain dripping down her face.
"I will not leave you either," she said. "We have learned that running does not help."
Only standing together does. The ruins, the storm, the curse, all felt distant now. What remained was the bond between them, forged in trust, courage, and the willingness to face the unknown together. The cliffs stretched endlessly below, the sea roaring with life, but they felt unafraid, tethered to each other, ready to face whatever came next. Kel looked at her, eyes dark and full of emotion, yet calm for the first time in decades. "We are free," he said softly, almost reverently. "Yes," Elara said, squeezing his hand again. "Free." And together. And as the moonlight bathed them in silver, the night whispered its approval. Darkness had faded, darkness had receded, and in the quiet aftermath of storm and curse, two hearts had found each other, unbroken, unafraid, and bound by trust and courage that would never fade.